So, welcome everyone. We're starting a few minutes early for technical reasons. This is Ayya Suvijjana, and I'm at Empty Cloud Monastery, and we will start with a meditation. This is a Sunday program for Dhammadharini, and I'm a guest speaker remotely. And so I will welcome everybody. In a few minutes, we can just sit silently, and then we'll start when it's actually time. Welcome. We'll be starting in a couple minutes. I'm going to welcome. Good to see people. I'm going to rearrange myself a little bit. We're going to start with meditation, about 15 minutes of meditation. This is taking me a couple minutes to get things organized, actually. I have a bell here. So people can start getting themselves in a good position. Welcome, Richard. We're already being live streamed, just to let you know. If you want your camera off during meditation, that's fine. You're just joining now. This is Ayya Suvijjana. I'm at Empty Cloud Monastery in New Jersey, and I'm guest teaching for the Dhammadharini Sutta study. The Sutta, thought was the class, but I think it's discussion, reflection. So we'll start now with 15 minutes of meditation. So if you can get yourselves in a position that it can keep alert, awake. You could, welcome to turn off your cameras if you think you might need to move a little bit. So we'll just sit silently for 15 minutes, and then there'll be a bell, and we'll start the sutta reading and discussion. And also, please mute your mics if you don't have them already muted. Sorry about that. No, it's hard to know what it's going to sound like. Welcome everyone again. Welcome those who might have just joined us. This is, say again, Ayya Suvijjana, and I'm at Empty Cloud Monastery, and I'm guest teaching. Ayya Sobana and others are at Wat Bhutanasar, and there's an auspicious occasion of Ajahn Mahaprasth's birthday celebration. And also there was 3 bhikkhunis, new bhikkhunis, Germany at Anenja Vihara that just received their full ordination, 3 women. So it's quite an auspicious day. And the day before the 4th of July is Independence Day. So I'm wishing everybody true independence, freedom from the afflictions, freedom from any kind of suffering, true liberation of the heart. So today's sutta is going to be in the Connected Discourses. I have here Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. This is actually, it's a wisdom publication. And so that's the SN, if you want to look it up online, SN, and it's number 46. The Samyutta is 46, and that's the Bojjhanga Samyutta, and it's the 3rd sutta. So SN 46.3, if you want to see online, or if you have a hard copy, it's starting on the bottom of page 1570, 1570. Have the hard copy. You can look it up there. So what I thought I would do is I will read it all the way through. I'm going to read Bhante Bodhi's translation, and then we can look at it a little. We'll take it bit by bit and have time for discussion. But I think it's best just to go through the whole thing, get kind of an idea of the whole sutta before we start going, because sometimes we don't make it through all the way. So it's really good to get the whole sutta at least read through. So here we go. This one, I think it was posted, it said ethics, but that's Bhante Sujato's translation. And Bhante Bodhi has translated it as virtue. So it's either virtue or ethics. So some people, the idea, ethics maybe sounds more friendly to some people than virtue. I don't know if they can relate to that. So anyway, so we'll start now. And so he's speaking to the bhikkhus, but just think of it as speaking to all of us. Because you might imagine the audience is a mixed audience, but usually at the time of the Buddha, they would address the senior-most or a senior-most group, but it includes everyone. There might have been all kinds of people sitting around hearing the Lord Buddha at this time. Bhikkhus, those bhikkhus who are accomplished in virtue, accomplished in concentration, accomplished in wisdom, accomplished in liberation, accomplished in knowledge and vision of liberation, even the sight of those bhikkhus is helpful, I say. Even listening to them, even approaching them, even attending on them, even recollecting them, even going forth after them is helpful, I say. For what reason? Because when one has heard the Dhamma from such bhikkhus, one dwells withdrawn by way of 2 kinds of withdrawal of body and withdrawal of mind. Dwelling thus withdrawn, one recollects that Dhamma and thinks it over. Whenever a bhikkhu dwelling thus withdrawn recollects that Dhamma and thinks it over, on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of mindfulness, this is sati sampajanya, is aroused by the bhikkhu. This bhikkhu arouses in oneself sati sampajanya. On that occasion, the bhikkhu develops the enlightenment factor of mindfulness. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of mindfulness comes to fulfillment by development in the bhikkhu. So you'll see a pattern of these three. Dwelling mindfully, he or she discriminates that Dhamma with wisdom, examines it, makes an investigation of it. Whenever a bhikkhu dwelling thus mindfully discriminates that Dhamma with wisdom, examines it, makes an investigation of it, on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of discrimination of states is aroused by the bhikkhu. On that occasion, the bhikkhu develops the enlightenment factor of discrimination of states. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of discrimination of states comes to fulfillment by development in the bhikkhu. While he, she, they discriminates that Dhamma with wisdom, examines it, makes an investigation of it, their energy is aroused without slacking. Whenever a bhikkhu's energy is aroused without slacking, as they discriminate that Dhamma with wisdom, examine it, make an investigation of it, on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of energy is aroused by that bhikkhu. On that occasion, the bhikkhu develops the enlightenment factor of energy. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of energy comes to fulfillment by development in that bhikkhu. So that's a Virya Sampajanya, Virya Sambojjhanga. And then the other one was, first we have Sati Sambojjhanga, and then Dhamma Vijaya Sambojjhanga. So when the energy is aroused, there arises in them spiritual rapture. Whenever bhikkhu's spiritual rapture arises in a bhikkhu whose energy is aroused, on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of rapture is aroused by the bhikkhu. On that occasion, the bhikkhu develops the enlightenment factor of rapture. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of rapture comes to fulfillment by development in the bhikkhu. So that's piti sambojjhanga, the piti. For one whose mind is uplifted by rapture, the body becomes tranquil and the mind becomes tranquil. Whenever the body becomes tranquil and the mind becomes tranquil in a bhikkhu whose mind is uplifted by rapture, on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of tranquility is aroused. That's passaddhi. On that occasion, a bhikkhu develops the enlightenment factor of tranquility. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of tranquility comes to fulfillment by development in the bhikkhu. For one whose body is tranquil and who is happy, the mind becomes concentrated. Whenever the mind becomes concentrated in a bhikkhu whose body is tranquil and who is happy, on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of concentration is aroused. by the bhikkhu. On that occasion, the bhikkhu develops the enlightenment factor of concentration. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of concentration comes to fulfillment by development in the bhikkhu. He closely looks on with equanimity at the mind thus concentrated. Whenever a bhikkhu closely looks on with equanimity at the mind thus concentrated. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of equanimity, this is upekkha, and the previous one was samadhi, sambhujanga. So this is upekkha sambhujanga. This is a progressing, building on one another. So equanimity is aroused, and then it's developed. It develops the enlightenment factor of equanimity. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of equanimity comes to fulfillment by development in the bhikkhu. Bhikkhus, when these 7 factors of enlightenment have been developed and cultivated in this way, 7 fruits and benefits may be expected. What are the 7 fruits and benefits? One attains final knowledge early in this very life. If one does not attain final knowledge early in this very life, then one attains final knowledge at the time of death. If one does not attain final knowledge early in this very life, or at the time of death, then with the utter destruction of the 5 lower fetters, one becomes an attainer of nibbana in the interval. So these talking, the first 2 are arhatship, and this one now is a non-returner. And there are different types of attaining anagami. If one does not attain final knowledge, okay, this is very early in this very life, and it ellipses or becomes an attainer of nibbana in an interval, then with the utter destruction of the 5 lower fetters, one becomes an attainer of nibbana upon landing. If one does not attain final knowledge early in this life and ellipses to, or becomes an attainer of nibbana upon landing, then with the utter destruction of the 5 lower fetters, one becomes an attainer of nibbana without exertion. If one does not attain final knowledge early in this very life or become an attainer of nibbana without exertion, then with the utter destruction of the 5 lower fetters, one becomes an attainer of nibbana with exertion. If one does not attain final knowledge early in this life, so on to or become an attainer of nibbana with exertion, then with the utter destruction of the 5 lower fetters, one becomes one bound upstream, heading towards the akanita realm. When, because the 7 factors of enlightenment have been developed and cultivated in this way, these 7 fruits and benefits may be expected. So now we've finished the reading all the way through, and then I'm going to take I'm going to look also at Bhante Sujato's translation. Some of you might have it, but it's nice. It's really nice how he's put the Pali side by side, and he does a lot more ellipses. Bhikkhu Bodhi, if you're comparing the two, includes a lot of the repetition, and sometimes the repetition is actually helpful, but sometimes it's helpful to understand what is being said by reading it without so many repetitions, because then you get kind of more of the meat of it. Excuse me if you're vegetarian. More of the essence of it, or what the meaning is pointing to. So we can look. Maybe we should just look at. I'll look at Bhante Sujato's and we can just compare them a little bit too. So I'm going to read a little bit again from the beginning so we can start the discussion with the first part of it, and then people can add their comments. Okay, it says, and then he says, mendicants for bhikkhus. Unfortunately, he says nuns for bhikkhunis, but we're mendicants too. So I'll have to talk to him about that one if I see him. Mendicants, when a mendicant is accomplished in ethics, immersion, this is the word he uses for samadhi, and the concentration is the old word, and some people object to that. So when they're accomplished in ethics, and then accomplished in all of these things, accomplished in ethics, immersion, knowledge, freedom, or the knowledge and vision of freedom, even the sight of them is very helpful, I say. Even to hear them, approach them, pay homage to them, recollect them, or go forth following them is very helpful, I say. Why is that? Because after hearing the teaching of such mendicants, a mendicant will live withdrawn in both body and mind. As they recollect and think about that teaching at such a time, a mendicant has activated the awakening factor of mindfulness. So I'm going to stop there. And it's pretty interesting that this person, a person is very inspired by somebody, a teacher, or just this is there's just talking about a bhikkhu who has actually pretty high attainment here. Attainment of knowledge and vision of freedom. So this may be, I see Tavira is coming into the picture. I didn't actually ponder this. They may be an arahant already, but they have some level of attainment here. And then hearing them or approaching them or paying homage to them, recollecting them or going forth after or following them, very helpful. Why is that? Because after hearing the teaching of such a mendicant, someone else, a mendicant, will live withdrawn in both body and mind. So they're very inspired by this person. And that at such a time, Bhante Sujata says, they have activated the awakening factor of mindfulness. So the Bhante Bodhi says aroused. So this is very interesting that we think of unremitting mindfulness being what leads to the what arouses, it brings up. And then it says that there's also developed and perfected, is how it Bhante Sujata says. So there is something about in the notes about that, and all it says pretty much is that they're using the idea of sati also having to do with remembering or thinking about. It's an anusati. So they recollect and think about, and that vitakati, anusarati. But the idea that the sati is a recollecting or remembering someone. So does anyone have any ideas about that or questions about that? This is starting out the awakening factors, like it's starting the the whole kind of cascade of each factor leading to one another. It might be clear in Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. It says, dwelling thus withdrawn, one recollects that Dhamma and thinks it over. It says recollects and thinks about the teaching. So they're here seeing it, recollecting the teaching that someone that's very inspiring to them has, they think about it, they recollect it, and then this brings up the enlightenment factor, the awakening factor of mindfulness.
Ayya, Richard has raised his hand.
Oh, Richard, please go ahead. Thank you.
Richard, please.
Thank you, Ayya. It's very interesting to note here about this this awakening of the enlightenment factor of mindfulness is directly connected with thinking over the Dharma. And the 4 factors of mindfulness are actually contemplations. Sometimes this has kind of been misunderstood as their meditations, as if they're equivalent to going to jhanas or they're jhanic meditation objects. No, they're actually contemplations, and this contemplation on them gets you eventually to understand exactly how they work in Dharma, in what I like to call objective reality. And there are many suttas where it's described that in the process of building towards achieving one of the noble attainments, sotapan, which again I like to call hearing entry as opposed to stream entry, that when you get to the point of being a Dhamma follower, you're listening to the Dhamma and remembering it and getting to understand it and even maybe discussing it with others, maybe even teaching it to others. And it's this constant thinking about the Dharma that at some point, the understanding of it unfolds in your mind and you become a sotapan. So you can see this connection here with it's this contemplation on the Dhamma, right? That fulfills the factor of mindfulness and prepares the mind eventually to go into the jhanas, which is the next step on the path.
Oh, thank you, Richard. So yeah,
right, that's just my way of looking at it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So it's good. Yeah, so that's a very good point there. So they're recollecting their this is the anusati. They're really contemplating, actually going over, remembering, and of deepening one's understanding also of what the teachings that they were hearing from this individual. This individual gave them some precious teaching, and then they were inspired to go into seclusion. And it says they're secluded in both body and mind, so they go off. And then they spend this time, as you're saying, just reflecting on the teachings. So, so this, I think it's a combination of, quieting the mind and also preparing the mind by quieting it, and then looking deeply into the Dhamma, to the teaching. So, yeah, I think that's a good. I just saw something flash on the screen, so I was just trying to comprehend what it was trying to tell me. Okay, so thank you very much, Richard. So I think for the sake of time, let's go on to the next one. So we're talking about, we're looking at Bhante Sujata's translation. We go through it a little bit more quickly. And so there's also, we notice here, after hearing the teaching of such mendicants, a mendicant will live withdrawn in both body and mind as they recollect and think about that teaching. At such a time, a mendicant has activated or aroused the awakening factor of mindfulness. They develop it, perfect it. So there's the three: the arousal, the developing, and the bringing it to fulfillment or perfecting it. So that'll repeat again and again through all the other awakening factors or enlightenment factors. So then we're going to go a little bit further. As they live mindfully in this way, they investigate, explore, and inquire into that teaching with wisdom. At such a time, a mendicant has activated the awakening factor of investigation of principles. They develop it and perfect it. So this is taking it deeper. They're recollecting. I think maybe even with the mindfulness, this anusati, they're maybe repeating some of what they heard again, and they're pondering it again and again. But here, they're going even deeper into it. They're investigating it. They're looking at it with inquire. It says they investigate, explore, inquire into the teaching with wisdom. So they're getting deeper into it. So dwelling this mindfully, he discriminates that Dhamma. This is a Bhante Bodhi's translation. Examines it, makes an investigation of it. Whenever they dwell this mindfully, discriminates that Dhamma with wisdom and examination, and examines it, makes an investigation of it. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of discrimination of state. So this is two different translations of that. As Bhante Sujata call it, investigation of principles. So that's the Dhamma Vijaya. Dhamma Vijaya Sambhojango. So there's those three there. So I think it's continuing to what Richard was just speaking about. And Elaine has a hand, it looks like. Elaine, did you want to say something? You can unmute yourself. Now I'm seeing where the little hand ends up. It's different on the screen than I'm used to.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about withdrawing in body and mind. This is something that I've been thinking about lately. Dispassion and compassion. Something is changing in me, and I guess it's good. Instead of being,
Pardon me? It's what? Your volume is breaking up. I can't hear you. Something just happened.
I think I've got a bad connection today.
Oh, I can hear you now.
I'm not speaking about the first part. I was thinking about being withdrawn in body and mind, and my attitudes are changing somewhat since I've been exposed to these teachings. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about dispassion and compassion. I think it relates to this sutta, because it's withdrawing in both body and mind. It's, I guess what I'm asking is,
I'm not hearing you now. I heard the part about dispassion and compassion and feeling like this was somehow related to the withdrawing in body and mind.
yes.
Yeah. So since you're breaking up, I can take that piece if that's okay. I didn't hear all of it, but I heard maybe enough to speak to that a little bit. Yeah. So withdrawing in body would be to take the time aside into secluded practice. And I think that if you even just take a period of time during the day to be just away from all your activities and being quiet, if you have a room or some place that you can just kind of sequester yourself, and also in a group too, there's like this, that's when the chitta viveka, or the being more, the seclusion, and I don't know what the Pali they used here, chitta viveka and kaya viveka. Kaya viveka would be the seclusion of, no, there was some slightly different word, but it doesn't matter. It's the same idea that you take time away and from your activities, and a quiet place that you can be still. If you can take a longer period of time, it's good. But I think even just some daily practice time and just some quietude. Dispassion and compassion arising from that. Is that what you're thinking? That this passion will
I'm thinking that there's a mindset. I guess what I'm trying to say is that we're trying to react to certain things. And it seems to me, since practicing Buddhism, you kind of remove yourself from that. So it's dispassionate, but not, how can you be withdrawn and still be compassionate? I guess that's in mind. In mind.
I think I'm getting what you're saying. So there's also you're not engaging. If you're in interactions with people, so the physical, where you be in contact with people, but you maybe the chitta viveka would be that you're a little bit more withdrawn from emotionally, or not. Yeah, I think I'm getting what you're saying. As you become a little bit more, I think it's the equanimity. So you're looking on without reactivity. You're seeing what's going on. You can have compassion as well. So you're more objective. You're not so emotionally tangled, possibly. So like I always think about when I was doing nursing care, if I got emotionally entangled with my patients, I couldn't do my job well. Or I would suffer a lot, and I would be a wreck. So I had some kind of, I did need to withdraw, pull in. And then I also noticed too, because being a monastic, just even walking down the street, sometimes people will come up to you and they say, "I'm dying of cancer." And they're like, and they're crying, they're trembling or something like that. Or people, or people that come to this monastery will be telling you all these things that are happening to you. So you kind of, you can hear that. It's actually a little different from what this is going on here, but I think in your daily life and interactions with people, you can hear other people suffering. You can kind of witness that without having your equilibrium thrown off, and then just being there for them, just so I think maybe that's what you're maybe experiencing. that you're not so emotionally
Yes.
thrown off by what's going on. So that is a kind of withdrawal in a way. But I
Of the
think,
mind.
yeah, so this is a part of this development that we're on the path that we're on. And so that is a good sign. And then you don't have to be like dispassionate doesn't mean that you're not concerned about other people, or that you won't listen to them, or you can't be there for them or something like that. So technical support is got their hand up.
Yeah, I have a brief comment that might be helpful to add on to that.
Okay.
That
This
the
is Matthew tech support, if you don't mind if I say your name. Very
yes,
kindly helping out with the
yeah,
Zoom
the
today.
compassion involves giving, and it in it can be giving on different levels. So it can be giving up the unskillful states of mind. So that can be a way to consider how the dispassion doesn't necessarily have to be at odds with the compassion, when you can give up things like killing and stealing, but also refrain from lying, slander, coveting and greed, insult with anger or associate with anger, even conceit. Giving up those unskillful states of mind are part of the compassion, not necessarily at odds with the dispassion. So those are my thoughts on that.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. So
Thank you.
let's continue on. We were talking about Dhamma Vijaya, and I don't know. I think that it's a kind of inspiring to me how these factors are building on one another, or kind of one flowing into another. I don't know. So they one kind of is activated and aroused. There was another word I saw. It was because I kind of an amateur. Well, I'm a Pali student rather than a translator or a scholar. But there's arado and the arada, and it's related to arabiti, and that's a bringing up or activating, but it's also achieved, accomplished. So there's a kind of a lot of different nuances to this word. And then it almost sounds like there's like this some in the notes it talks a lot about the mind moments, and this is all these different phases between being around, bringing it up, developing it and perfecting it. And it sounds like it in the commentaries, this is kind of more like the Abhidhamma, where there's this mind moment where the awakening happens, kind of bingo. And to my mind, it does happen, it all culminates in one mind moment bingo, but I think there is that bringing it up, developing it and perfecting it, and then all of it just kind of gels maybe in a single mind moment. But I think these things take time, because when you talk about investigating, inquiring with wisdom, exploring, discriminating, to me, it sounds like what Richard was talking about, where you're going really getting into it and thinking about it, and then getting really even deeper into that investigation, and even on a kind of a more intuitive level than the intellectual level. I'm thinking. This is my thoughts on this. So that's the discrimination of states or investigation of principles, whichever makes more sense to you, for that enlightenment factor. And then as they investigate principles with wisdom in this way, their energy is aroused. It's aroused up, unflagging, is how Bhante Sujato has translated this. And see, here's this arada again. So at such a time, a mendicant has activated the awakening factor of energy. They develop it and perfect it. So this Wuryasam Bojango comes up from the investigating. So can you imagine that? Or have you experienced that where you're looking or contemplating the Dhamma really deeply, and then there's this the energy comes up, your interest is there, you're a little bit of excitement. Oh, I'm starting to understand this. This is starting to make sense to me. I can see how this is, I don't know, how people had that kind of experience. Sometimes just reading the suttas or hearing a teaching, and then your energy just comes up. Yes?
Hearing the teachings from a good teacher made me realize years ago all I could do was find maybe the odd book on Buddhism. And so I was getting bits and pieces, and until recently with COVID and that, and finding a lot of online teachers and good teachers, I realized that a lot of my views they were of my own making. So it was kind of a surprise to learn that different aspects of what I was thinking were wrong. And yeah, it does get kind of obsessive. I'm kind of obsessed with learning, and I want to know more and meditate. So those are changes. I think I just talked in a circle here. Sorry about that.
That's okay. So I think this particular, what's happening here though, is the person is really understanding the Dhamma. They've gotten deep into the meaning of the Dhamma, and I think even beyond the intellect, they're getting it like really clearly. And so this energy is coming up. But I think even just some better intellectual understanding, things just becoming really clear can bring up energy. Savira, did you have an actual hand rather than a virtual one? Okay. So should we continue on? Any more comments? No? So we're looking again at Bhante Sujato's. So when their energetic spiritual rapture arises, I love this. This is Piti Niramisa. And Niramisa is a unworldly or not of the flesh or pure. So it's a So this piti is rapture or joy or delight. And it's interesting that this is nira misa, because a lot of times when you hear piti described, that it is more a physical experience. If anyone's experienced it, the body is enlivened. But what I think it really is pointing to, it's not, we're not deriving the pleasure or the delight or the joy from the senses, the external senses, the physical senses. That's what this is actually saying. The niramisa. So because the energy has been aroused in with the understanding of the Dhamma, the deep penetration of the Dhamma. So this joy that's not related to like taste or sights or touch, this is the kind of joy it is. It's a rapture that it is. It's coming just from the mind, but it's actually experienced in the body. So that's why it seems a little bit that I had to contemplate it a little bit, because when it says niramisa, so at such a time, a mendicant has activated or aroused the awakening factor of rapture, and they develop and perfect it. So developing and perfecting rapture, that's very interesting. When a mind is full of, okay, so we'll stop there at the rapture. So it's really beautiful to think that rapture is actually an enlightenment factor. Does anyone like to comment on that? The idea of that, the rapture? Lily has a hand.
Yeah, I actually have a question about this. Is this PT different than the PT like that they talk about with the jhanas?
So because it is an enlightenment factor, a person can have the PT in a jhanic state, and it's not, I mean, jhana is a high attainment, but it may not be the actual awakening factor. So so that is an interesting question. What is the difference? Why is it an awakening factor?
Yeah, I guess I bring it up partly because I don't ever think I get to an absorptive jhanic state, but I do feel like my formal meditations are actually filled with a lot of PT. And I've been trying to have a sense of like, what's going on? Why is this happening?
So you're experiencing this happiness that isn't related to the flesh, the physical senses. And so that's a kind of a nourishment. That's a nutriment. And then it also, I think if we think that our happiness is dependent on the senses, on this, physical senses, then that's a cause of dukkha. That I have to satisfy myself through the 5 physical senses, and that's my source of happiness. But to realize there's this joy, this that's based on getting into deep states of meditation, or from contemplating the Dhamma. It sounds like you can, but I think probably at this point they may even be heading towards jhanic state. And actually they are. And Richard has a hand.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lily. That's a good question. And yeah, it's a really nutriment for your practice. And Richard.
Yes, thank you, Ayya. Yeah, since this is the 7 bhujangas, you can see that you're going from mindfulness to investigation of states, to energy, to piti. So this is how it's described in the suttas, the process. And this piti is the piti of the first jhana. And we know this because when the Buddha was starving himself to death, and he came to where he thought, well, if I go any farther with this, my body's going to die and I haven't attained anything, not any worldly distinction or any higher distinction of mind or anything. And so, this can't be the way. So he began to reflect and look back on his lives, on his life, I mean. And he went back. In other words, he's saying, well, how did I get here? You know what I mean? So where did I go? What decisions did I make? Just like any of us would in a very difficult situation. And he gets back to when he was a young boy and he's sitting under the rose apple tree and he spontaneously goes into first jhana. That he didn't know what it was. He didn't understand it or anything, but it had a profound impact on him. And he says, oh, maybe that is the way. That pleasure, that joy, that piti. Because it's not a worldly pleasure. It's not the pleasure of the senses. Okay, it's a pleasure of the mind. So we can see as this goes on, just to jump ahead a little bit, that after piti, he goes to tranquility, and then from tranquility, he goes to concentration, and from concentration, he goes to equanimity. And these are the stages of going through the jhanas to achieve equanimity. So it's basically what Buddha's doing here is he's giving us a roadmap, of how we should approach this. Thoroughly investigate, the Dhamma, like you were asking a few minutes ago, has anyone had any experiences with this? And the last several years, I've really been studying, because I retired and everything, the suttas extensively. And sometimes I'll study all day and through the night without thinking of food or water or anything, completely awake, energetic, not falling asleep. And then suddenly I'll notice sunlight coming through the window and I'll think, uh-oh, I did it again. I stayed up all night studying the suttas. Because you get that energy, as you and I'm not saying just reading the books. I'm saying I'm getting insights which are leading me to look around and see how this relates to that and stuff like that, because I'm getting insights into it. Also, sometimes in my meditation, I will actually think about the Dharma. I will contemplate like the 12-fold chain of dependent origination or something like that. And sometimes it actually causes me to begin to go into states. I can see that it's happening. There's like a certain strange feelings and everything in the body of concentration and everything. So I think this is a really great sutta, and it's really pointing in a very clear way, how to really approach the Buddha's teaching. And like one person was saying, well, what about compassion? And the tech support fellow brought up, taking at least the 5 precepts and things like that. That is an extremely compassionate act. I'm not going to hurt anyone. I'm not going to steal from anyone. I'm not going to transgress anyone. I'm not going to lie, etc. like that. Those are very wonderful gifts you're saying to the universe. You know what I mean? I'm not going to do these things. And Buddha also explains that the highest charity, right? And charity is given for compassion, right? People need things, so you help them, is teaching the Dharma. So the Tathagata one says, well, he's just kind of living this abstract life, meditating. No, he's giving the highest charity because that teaching of the Dhamma is going to free you from samsara, from birth and death, and end all your dukkha. So these things are all kind of like interrelated. Okay.
Yeah, thank you,
anyway,
Richard.
thank you very much.
Yeah. I would say this is leading to Sama Samadhi here. And it can experience rapture prior to entering Samadhi. It is possible. But the mind is getting prepared for that. And this is how this depth of just like we were saying, that you can start understanding the Four Noble Truths by seeing the causes of suffering, when you can see how we're seeking something outside of ourselves for happiness, if we don't need to do that. So so this person is experiencing, so they can let go of that craving for external things, and they're developing rapture. Isn't that an interesting idea? And when the mind is full of rapture, and the body and mind become tranquil. So this is here where they're starting to get deeper into the, maybe they're at access. I don't know at this point. This is my idea with it, but they're definitely heading towards that jhana. And then when the body is tranquil, one feels bliss, and the mind becomes immersed in samadhi. This is Bhante Sujatos. We're using the word samadhi. I would just prefer using the word samadhi. Chittam samadhiyati, samadhi sambojango tasmim samaye bhikkhu. So this is Arado again. So activated the awakening factor of immersion by this bliss. Sukino. So this is piti sukha. Piti's the sukino is here. And the translator has a question mark, but that's having to do with sukha. So this is the piti sukha. So the piti is arising, and then they enter jhana. This is immersion. So at such a time, mendicant has activated the awakening factor of immersion. They develop it and perfect it. So they may be going into deeper stages of jhana here. And then this is the fourth jhana is the very deep equanimity. But it does say so they develop and perfect it, and they look closely over the mind immersed in samadhi at such a time. A mendicant has activated the awakening factor of equanimity. They develop and perfect it. So so this gives you a little bit of an idea about these deep states of jhana, where they're actually one is able to look at one's own mind here. How does Bhikkhu Bodhi say it here? What does his translation says? For one whose body is tranquil and who is happy, the mind becomes concentrated. Whenever a bhikkhu's mind becomes concentrated, the bhikkhu's body is tranquil and who is happy. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of concentration is aroused. Okay. He looks closely on with equanimity at the mind, thus concentrated. Whenever a bhikkhu looks closely on with equanimity at the mind, thus concentrated, on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of equanimity is aroused by them. On that occasion, they develop the enlightenment factor of equanimity. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of equanimity comes to fulfillment by development. So looking on is actually the upekkha, the real actual. So just look at upekkha is usually translated as equanimity, but it actually there is this aspect of just seeing or looking on. But it would be seeing it clearly without the mind wavering at all, just really looking. It says unaffected is lack of involvement or reaction. This is a translation. The translator is saying this, but equanimity is just the aspect of seeing things clearly without the mind wavering. So this is bringing this all to fulfillment with the ending with the equanimity and seeing the mind clearly. And that's the fulfillment of the awakening factors. So so I think that it may be indicating also the three knowledges, like you're looking at the mind and seeing clearly what is that the taints of the asavas been destroyed. If it's an awakening factor, but it does say here, when it's fulfilled in this way, one attains final knowledge early in this life. So it doesn't sound like it's complete quite yet. They may at that point be attaining arahantship and really looking at the mind and seeing that the taints have been destroyed, but at least they see that the 5 lower fetters have been destroyed. So this is like a at least some very high level of awakening has it been attained by this process. So it seems like maybe as Richard does, to keep investigating the suttas, and you can piece together the meaning of these teachings by investigating further and really seeing how in different suttas the progression is slightly different, or some other information has been added to it. And so I would encourage this kind of investigation. Let's knock something over. Balanced. So, and then there's those seven benefits, fruits and benefits. They attain enlightenment early on in this very life. So this is complete awakening, I believe. And if not, they attain, I think it's, yeah. Bhikkhu Bodhi is using a different term slightly. I just lost it. So he
Final
says
knowledge?
Yeah, final knowledge here. Final knowledge. One attains final knowledge, they become an arahant early in this life. So it says to be expected. So this is they attain enlightenment in this early on in this very life, and this one says they attain final knowledge. And if they do not attain final knowledge, so so you might think that if they go through this whole process that they would be fully awake, but this is indicating that there's different stages that they may be at. So either arhatship or non-return, and some level of non-return. There's different permutations of that. So I really can't say too much about that. But we have a little bit more time for discussion. Read through the sutta. Vera, Seminary to Vera, do you have any thoughts on this sutta? Doesn't have any thoughts. Lily has a hand. I see Lily's hand.
Thank you. I have a question about, I guess I've never studied the sutta before, but I've definitely heard a lot of talk about the 7 factors of awakening. And I'm wondering, are there other suttas that do something very similar where they lay them out, or do they, I mean, I get the sense that they are always given in this progression,
Yeah.
but I wonder too, whether there's sort of another perspective of the awakening factors, I don't know, being presented differently in the teachings.
No, there's usually, they're almost, they're in the suttas, they're always in this order, this progression and this kind of unfolding like this. And often what's preceding this is 4 foundations of mindfulness. And actually, as Matthew had mentioned, sila. Sila is a prerequisite for actually even the satipatthana. You have to be keeping at least 5 precepts in order to have any success with the satipatthana. So there's actually a longer progression leading to the awakening factors, starting with the sense restraint and keeping your sila pure, and then devotion to moderation in eating and sleeping, and then goes to going to a secluded place, and then abandoning the hindrances, and then developing the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And then when your mindfulness is unremittent, then the whole cascade of the awakening factors just kind of unfolds one by one, one by one. And that progression, the progression that is in the sutta. But this sutta is a little more, it's unique in that one is inspired by hearing a teaching from monastic, a teacher, and then so they contemplate the Dhamma. And the Dhamma could even be the Satipatthana. I don't know. It's like, but it could be it could be dependent origination or something like that. And then because the mind has been prepared by all these other factors. You can't, I think a lot of times you just get this bit and you think maybe that's the starting point, but actually there's other things that are going on. If the person is a bhikkhu, then they have to keep their precepts, and they're trained in sense restraint and moderation in eating and moderation in sleep and things like that. So all these things may be taken as a given to the point where they get inspired by this teacher and go into seclusion. So yeah, so it is a standard progression. And then there's lots of yeah, if you look at actually Satipatthana, the Majjhima Nikaya middle length discourses 10. You read the whole thing through, and then it'll the awakening factors is one of the dhammas to investigate. So yeah, so but it does talk about unremitting mindfulness. When the mindfulness is unremitting, then the awakening factor of mindfulness arises. So this is the how this one is different and unique, this particular sutta. And then in the Samyutta Nikaya, if you have, I don't know, you can find online, but there's a whole Samyutta, a whole collection of short suttas that are all about the Bojjhangas. But sometimes it's just kind of referring to the Bojjhangas. So, yeah, I think we do have to contemplate and piece things together from the teachings and listen to teachers that have explored this deeply and practiced with it. Because I think sometimes the suttas seem like a little bit like a syllabus or something, like they are an outline, and they're not giving us the full information, or they're assuming that we know some of the background information. So this is where this kind of investigation that Richard does can lead us to really piecing it all together, and maybe this is the kind of thing to do to activate the Sambhojanyas starting with the Sati Sambhojanya. So I think we could stop soon unless somebody else has a question or a comment. Appreciate everybody's attention and patient listening and your dedication to the Dhamma in order to be here on this 4th of July weekend. So maybe the independence of the mind, the liberation of the mind. This is our true independence, is a freedom from unwholesome states and awakening. So I wish this for everyone. And good to see you. Very good to see you, Seminary.
Thank you so much for your teachings.
Oh, you're welcome. And thanks to Matthew for being tech support. And maybe I'll see you again virtually. If I get another invitation, it works out for me. See you again another time. So take care, everyone. And we can pay respects. This is, I don't know how clearly you can see this Buddha image here, but there is an image here. If you have an image in your, Tavira's, Seminary Tavira's turning towards the Buddha image there, you can bow towards an image of your own or at the screen, the image here. Araham Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Uttam Bhagavantam Abhivadeni. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami. Supatipano Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Sangham Namami. Have a safe weekend, everyone.
You too. Nice to see you. Thank you so much, Ayya.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
You are.
Yeah.